This is The Other 51. I'm Brian, and this week, my guest is Scott Nover, a technology and business reporter for Quartz. Scott Nover, first of all, thanks for joining us on The Other 51, and thank you for taking time out of your thrilling day of watching Senate committee hearings about technology to join us.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, it's my least favorite thing to do is to listen to lawmakers talk about technology. Today's topic was artificial intelligence, and my mind hadn't completely gone to mush, but it was getting close.
I mean, they can't do Facebook. I mean, like not even like normal. How are they even beginning to talk about AI?
I don't know. I think that was my question going into it. So far, I watched the first hour of the Senate Judiciary hearing, and it was better than I expected. I think because they can play around with ChatGPT, and it's an isolated thing. They don't have the kind of media literacy or cultural understanding of what a Facebook or and they understand Twitter better, but a Facebook or a similar social network, Snapchat, TikTok is, because their communities aren't there.
Right.
They haven't been, certainly didn't grow up with these technologies, but also don't have any functional use for it. When you have a scheduler that is their job to give you your calendar, you don't even need birthdays, on Facebook. So what do you? So anyway, sometimes these lawmakers understand certain technologies better than others.
So the hearing will be passed by the time this episode airs, but I'm curious, what is the aim of this hearing? What is the Senate Judiciary Committee? What are they trying to kind of do on this? Can you kind of explain the background of what they're trying and hoping to do?
Sure. So basically this year we've seen a big hype cycle about artificial intelligence, mainly driven by one company called OpenAI, and they have a product called ChatGPT, which has become very popular. They also have another, which is a chatbot essentially, and they have another one called DALL-E, which is an artificial intelligence image generator. You can type in a prompt and it'll make you a fake Warhol or something like that. And AI is kind of a catch-all term for a suite of technologies that could completely change the world or not. And so they're trying to or not. And so they're trying to kind of rein in this technology before it gets out of hand. And yeah, I think there's some good intentions behind that. But Congress has a bad track record of understanding the latest and greatest tech, let alone regulating it in a way that actually improves people's lives and still fosters competition and things like that.
It's interesting because kind of the theme of this podcast, and from my perspective, it kind of seems like AI, I mean, it's been the next thing for at least 5-10 years now. It's kind of been around and in the general tech space. But it didn't seem and I think it's funny that once it was ChatGPT, which is kind of really started from my perspective, this whole thing. And I find it very funny that the minute they came for the writers and the journalists, panic ensued.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I play media critic a lot, and everything's about us, everyone's a media critic, everyone fashions themselves a writer, and so when there is something that can appears to threaten what we do as intelligent creative writers, I think that we get a little defensive. But yeah, I don't know, I think ChatGPT will replace a certain subset of bad writing on the internet. So there'll be a lot of crappy websites that are just fully populated with ChatGPT text, but there's a lot of crappy websites that are populated with stuff like that now. So
I mean, I remember in grad school, this is 15 years ago now, writing the $50 articles for those filler websites, right? Give us 300 words on traveling to Orlando or something like that, and you write the 3 best hotels and you Google stuff, you write it, you got paid $50. It was easy money.
Right. Or an SB Nation, sports site or something like that. One of these big networks of low paid sports writing or something like that to translate it. But yeah.
So What's interesting for you in this space, in the AI space, and kind of the way things are coming, like from your perspective, writing about it and thinking about it and reporting on it, like not necessarily where it's going, but what's most interesting to you about this topic right now?
Yeah, I think just thinking about the chat bots, what's really interesting is kind of how we think about error and truth with
Okay.
it. I think that a lot of people are typing in questions and hoping to get answers, and that's not exactly what ChatGPT is meant for. We just did I'm hosting a podcast myself called the Quartz Obsession Podcast. There's a plug. And we just did an episode about AI hallucinations, essentially the propensity of these systems to be wrong, but not only be wrong, but not even realize that they're, or like have any sort of awareness that they're wrong. And these are very human terms for it, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but essentially, I think about ChatGPT as like a fancy autocomplete, or kind of it guesses what you want to hear more than it guesses the right answer. And I
Okay.
think that just thinking about these tools in a different way is helpful. Um, because you can type in, I typed in who is Scott Nover, and I found out I was a reporter at Axios. I'm not. I'm at Quartz. I found out I went to American University. I didn't. I went to George Washington University. My colleague did the same. She found out she was fired. So like they're just very confident and very wrong, which humans are too. But I
Hmm.
think it's just we need to take, at least at this stage in the technology, we need to think about them a little bit differently. Like it can mimic, Shakespeare, but it can't. It's not a good question and answer service.
Right. I like how when you asked it those questions, how relatively close it was.
Right.
That's kind of
Yeah.
eerie.
Oh no. Yeah. It told me um, I won the Emerging Journalist Award from the National Press Club
Congratulations.
thank you, for a Politico article I wrote about how the media is failing us or something. It was like something that sounded exactly like something I would have written, but I just never wrote it, let alone for Politico. I don't even know if I have a Politico byline. Maybe one. So, but kind of like, if you were like, oh, I follow Scott on Twitter. This sounds about right, but it was just shades of wrong on everything.
So you mentioned having gone to GW, and I am curious on a career path. So how does one become a media writer, a business technology writer? What's your career path like?
Yeah, I was always very obsessed with media. That was kind of the way that I realized I wanted to be a journalist, was discovering that people write about journalism and people write about media. It's a very meta and inside baseball thing that you and I do. But I studied something called political communication at George Washington University. It was kind of a half journalism, half communications school, and got my bachelor's and master's there in that field. But I only really realized that I wanted to be a journalist when I started reading like David Carr and Brian Stelter and um, Columbia Journalism Review and Neiman Lab and outlets like that, and realized I could get paid to think about and write about the media for a living, and talk to people about it, which is what we're doing today. But That kind of unlocked a lot of possibilities in my mind. And since then, I've moved more over to writing about social media companies and technology as an extension of that. But the through line in my career has always been kind of thinking about the way that information flows and how companies make money or don't make money
Mhm.
on that proposition.
I miss David Carr.
Me
Man, he would
too.
have been great to read the last couple of years. I mean, he's great to read now, but imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what he would have been like during this age, because I think it's so hard to do media criticism now. And maybe that's true of all times, and when he was doing it, and looking back, his writing seems really prescient. But he really understood, especially like the early digital era of journalism. And but I would have loved to have him during the Trump era, and I would have
Hmm.
loved to have him now, as a lot of these digital journalism outfits like BuzzFeed News are going under, and how to make sense of that. I feel like um, there are some people that do media criticism really well. Jack Schaefer at Politico magazine is phenomenal, and a friend of mine. And you know, Ben Smith. I thought Ben Smith's column at the Times was really good when he was doing that. But you know, it's not a ton of people who I think are like writing on media and write all the time like Carr
Mm-hmm.
was.
What you mentioned that you think writing about the media now is hard. Why is that?
It is just like it's so fractionalized, and it's just I think it's the end of a hype cycle, and it's the end of and we're seeing it in the tech space too. We're seeing the technology I mean, kind of as a result of the coupling of media and technology, but uh, in a we've never seen kind of social media companies and digital media companies in a high interest rate environment, and so it can sometimes be harder to chronicle the realities of a falling industry than kind of the possibilities of it. And I don't know. I mean, uh, it's just it's kind of a sad time in media. There's not a lot of jobs. A lot of outfits are closing. It's a little difficult to see what's ahead of us in the space. I would be nervous giving advice to, you know, a young journalist. Like, I don't what even the things like 5 or 6 years ago when I was starting out, like, are not, you know, these aren't translatable lessons. You know?
Right. Well, and like you mentioned, BuzzFeed News closing. Vice just this week, as we're recording this, announces bankruptcy. And obviously, kind of
Right.
two of the darlings of that digital journalism movement, kind of in the 2010s when it kind of that era moved. And I don't know. I like you, I kind of find this time of journalism and media super interesting because we're kind of, I like the way you said it at the end of a hype cycle, right? So it's like we had the 15 years of everything is changing and how digital is changing media. And now it's just kind of like, okay, we're here now. So it's like that now what situation. And I find that I don't know. I just find that to be interesting living in after so much kind of like hype and upheaval and like what's next and like okay, this kind of feels like this is next now. I don't know, it's weird, it's a weird time.
It's a weird time. I think like the companies that have escaped that fate have done so by um, you know, taking money a little bit more wisely than others. And there's been a lot of consolidation. Look at Vox. Vox Media is now, you know, now just bought a bunch of properties. They own New York Magazine now. They've kind of um, avoided that fate by through conglomeration, I guess. Um, but even I work for Quartz, which was a darling of the digital media space, and we're now part of a larger media company called Geo Media. And I think we'll see what's next soon. I think that it's a tricky time because the tech sector is suffering, but the broader economy is doing okay. It's not awful. The job market in general outside of tech and media is pretty fine. And I think that eventually advertising budgets will come back, and people will still want to advertise in media, and when consumers have a couple more dollars in their pocket, they might want to subscribe to media. So you know, I think it's a particularly tough time, but these things come in waves, and there's no point belaboring the dark periods. I just I hope that that people want to read and pay for and invest in news in a smart way and not try to milk it for every penny.
And you think about like the social media growth and so much of media for and a lot of things like was so dedicated on that big growth. I think of The Athletic, which I've written a lot about and talked a lot about, and
Right.
they kind of had that idea where they got bought by the Times, and their subscriber base, it's so weird because like they have a ton of subscribers, but a lot of those are probably time subscribers who
Right.
are lumped in and they're losing money, but they're stable and like they're not gonna, it's just it was such an interesting time of like big growth, but now it's all, I don't know. It's I'm stumbling over words, but it's such a like we're at the now what's next, and there's not a now what to follow it.
Right. I will say that the Athletic combining with the New York Times was the one was the one thing that saved me money because I subscribed to both, and now I was like, oh, I don't have to pay for the Athletic anymore. It's $60 a year or whatever that I have back in my pocket. But yeah, I mean that's a great example of a company that grew so quickly and hired everyone, and the narrative for years was they were decimating the local news pages or the sports pages, and but they actually made an incredible product. The writing was phenomenal. The beat coverage was great, and but then they ended up struggling and needing a buyer, and the New York Times recognized that luckily, and threw them a lifeboat. But yeah, I don't totally know what to make of that either.
So what in general with we'll like use Vice and BuzzFeed News as the examples here. Can you kind of explain from your perspective in your reporting kind of what's going on? What the heck's happening? Why are these companies, these online news organizations kind of hitting their wall and shutting down? What's happening in that space that's leading to this happening?
It's complicated and it's individual. The constant is that there are economic pressures on each of these, and those are exacerbated by the fact that most of these companies are funded by venture capitalists, and everyone in the space is kind of squeezed by higher interest rates the and lower marketing budgets, and in the case of the subscription ones, less consumer money. So BuzzFeed's the only one that is really shutting down. Like Vice declared bankruptcy, they're still going strong. Hopefully they can survive this. BuzzFeed shut down in part after a bad SPAC deal, and SPACs are a kind of form of a shell company that helps something go public. There was talk for many years about BuzzFeed's incredible valuation, that it was a unicorn, that it was a $3 billion business or $4 billion business or something like that. And Vice had similar valuations. And they tried for years to go public through the traditional means, which is IPO. And that wasn't panning out for one reason or another. And my understanding is that they tried to do it through this alternative means, a SPAC, or a special purpose acquisition company. And essentially, they did go public through this route, and the SPAC, like many in this company, like many other SPACs, DraftKings is a good example, just completely didn't have the standing to keep the stock price up, and it was just widely considered a bad deal. I might be butchering some of that history, but that's my understanding of it, is that bad management egged on by tough investor demands and market demands kind of doom this property. And ultimately, Jonah Peretti, who's the CEO of BuzzFeed and one of the founders, did what one of his investors had wanted him to do for a long time, which was shutter the news division at BuzzFeed News. And if you're listening to this and you haven't followed the entire history of BuzzFeed News, and you're wondering why we're, bemoaning the death of the listicle website, BuzzFeed had a very thriving news division called BuzzFeed News that did unbelievable investigative work, had one of the best technology reporting teams in the business, funneled a lot of talent that's now at the New York Times and other top outlets, and won a Pulitzer Prize for an investigative piece within the last 2 years, right, or 3 years, I think. And so it became a way for young journalists to get good experience outside of the kind of stodgy corners of the New York Times or the Washington Post, or these really hard to get to news institutions. And so there have been a lot of mea culpas recently, and for good reason. It was a really valued part of the media ecosystem, and now it is gone. And what do we do in the aftermath of that?
So when you were dreaming of and wanting to write about media and thinking about writing about media, did you ever think about writing about SPAC deals and interest rates?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I went to school in DC and thought I wanted to work in politics for a long time before I even realized I wanted to be a journalist. And but my first and I started writing about more of the intersection of media and politics, for lack of a better term. I was at the Atlantic for a bit and early in my career and freelancing and there as part of that and writing about, you know, Trump's tiffs with Jim Acosta and the death of Jamal Khashoggi and some other big political media stories. But my first job was at Adweek, which is a business trade publication for advertising, and through that, and now I'm at Quartz, another business publication. I've become a business reporter, incidentally, which is something that it's kind of ironic because I told my dad for years I would never go to business school. And now I think and write about business for a while. But I think that that business reporting is it's so underrated. I think that
Yeah.
understanding the way that the money moves and the economic forces behind any industry is just, you can't understand what a business does without understanding what the money is behind it. You can't understand why Gap does something or puts out a statement or amends its, factory policies or its, the countries that it's working in, if you don't understand what not only the politics of it are, but the business of it are. And so I think that that's combining that kind of business understanding with my politics inclination and background has been really valuable for me, just understanding media and technology, because it's all political and it's all business.
Yeah. We have at St. Bonaventure, we have master classes for our grad students, and Chris LaPlaca, who's been at ESPN since the beginning. He's their senior vice president of PR or whatever his title is. And he always tells our first year grad students, know how your company makes money.
Right.
And if you're a reporter, you're a play-by-play person or whatever, know how your company makes money. How do you go about learning and becoming familiar with terms like SPAC deals and the importance of interest rates? Like, what's your process for not only just understanding it yourself, but then being able to make it understandable to a reader who's maybe not an MBA person?
Right. And I do not have an MBA myself, nor any sort of formal training in business. I think, first of all, working with great editors is key for any journalist, knowing that you need good editing and good guidance. But also the pressure that it puts on you to write an article about something you don't totally know about is a very scary and daunting thing, and makes you realize very quickly that you need to shore up every detail and make the extra call and talk to experts and really understand things. And I've learned a lot from colleagues of mine who are more business inclined as well, and reading their coverage. But yeah, I think that what's been interesting is that I'm so interested naturally in media and the way that information moves, and stories of business have become much more like that recently. I've spent a lot of time at Quartz covering kind of the meme stock stories and the cryptocurrency stories, and ultimately these are all about word of mouth movements in the markets and hype and vibes, and not business fundamentals, but the way that people get excited about a thing and communicate that thing to their friend and make big bets and financial decisions based on that word of mouth and hype. So I've kind of tricked my brain into covering more business stories by making them seem like media stories. And I think that when you don't totally come from that world yourself, it's incumbent on you sometimes it's easier, but it's also incumbent on you to explain it to people like they have no idea how interest rates factor into something, or they have no idea how a company goes public. And I think that the explanatory function for me is one of the most important functions of being a journalist, of just making sure people understand something understand it in a way that they might not get from a different news outlet.
Right. It's not about, I've seen this in journalism. I've seen this as a school board member. It's not about making it simplifying it, this is or dumbing it down. It's about, this is a complex thing. Here's how you can make it understandable, not necessarily simple, but you can kind of understand how it works.
Right. And that was the Vox model for
Yeah.
many years. I
Yeah.
guess it still is, but they were like, all their stories were like this explained or that explained. And there's like a Pulitzer for explanatory reporting now. I think that that's always been kind of the magazine tradition of journalism, is kind of taking that step back and reframing something and explaining it in basic terms for people and letting people in on these conversations. And I try to take that, and I think the digital news outlets of today are kind of reminiscent of the magazine tradition more so than the newspaper tradition in a lot of ways, and I try to keep that in mind.
You've said a few times that you've been fascinated with how information moves. What about that is fascinating to you?
I don't know. I don't know. Why am I interested in it? Maybe because I'm self-centered. No. I don't know. I've always watched the news. I've always read magazines. I never grew up with newspapers in my house, but I read magazines and watched a lot of network and cable TV. And when I was in college, I was really interested in kind of the political aspect of that, and I thought maybe I wanted to be like a press secretary or something, or like a character on the West Wing. And then I realized that I was more interested in kind of the aspects of those jobs and those professions that deal with analyzing the way media is moving and how information is changing. And I think it's become so mainstream in recent years. The media, like Trump was president, that was a huge media story. Like we talk about media on the front page of the New York Times now. We talk about it. It's like everything CNN talks about now is media, in one way or the other. And so I think that, and especially with like the tech conversation has been entirely about media for a long time. I know we started this about AI, but I think that when I was first getting into it, even 10 years ago, the media criticism and media reporting were relegated to the second page of the business section or something like that, or I don't know, or further. And now there's kind of been an understanding since at least Trump was elected that the way that people interact with media is a front page story.
So if you could be a character on the West Wing, who would it be?
Oh geez, I haven't watched in a while. I just love how there's like there's no like everything is like a speech can just change the world in the West Wing. It's like, oh, I just got to get this one speech right, and
right.
It's like that hasn't been true since decades before the West Wing came out. I always like Josh Lyman. I always liked him. He was kind of running things, but also like very much another press person. They were all press people on the West Wing. It was all speeches and talking to some media.
I got to go Leo McGarry. If I got to be a character, I'm going to be Leo. So,
oh yeah,
not with the dying in the middle of it, but everything else.
I was just watching a different show, and Mrs. Landingham the actress that played Mrs. Landingham popped into it for a minute.
I did that with a movie. It was the actress who plays Nancy McNally, the Secretary of Defense. Right. I'm like, Nancy McNally, and my wife's like, what? West Wing? Never mind. Anyway, that's how I live my life. So I'll get you out of here on this. It's the question I ask everybody I have on the podcast. What's the best thing that you've read lately?
Oh man, what is the best thing that I've read lately? Can I go outside of journalism?
Yeah, please.
I'm reading a really good book called The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller.
Okay.
It's fiction. She also wrote a book called Circe, and they're both kind of like recasting Greek myths in very modern light. And I won't give any more away, but if you like Greek mythology and wondering about the secret life of Achilles, then you'll like this book.
I mean, my daughter just did a production of The Lightning Thief, the Percy Jackson musical, so we are well steeped in Greek mythology in this house. So that sounds good.
I grew up reading a lot of Greek mythology, and I'm enjoying revisiting it as an adult.
Very nice. All right. Well, Scott, this has been awesome. I'll let you get back to the Senate. Sorry. But
No.
Thanks for doing this, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
Thanks for listening to The Other 51. Show notes for this and all of our episodes can be found at sportsmediaguide.com by clicking on the Other 51 tab. If you like the show, please consider giving it a rating and a review, either at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help people find the show. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.